Hi, I'm David Bell. Welcome to this episode of Through the Year with John Wesley. We've all heard the term leverage. How does a single person, or a school or a business, have a much greater impact than others doing the same thing? There are two answers, I think. One is money, to begin with, but the other has nothing whatsoever to do with money. It's leverage. Today's episode is all about one tiny insight John Wesley had about his sermons. He used leverage to create a much greater effect from his sermons than we might expect. We'll see how he leveraged his sermons so that anyone could enjoy the benefits of practical theology for better daily living. So let's see how he did this. First, you need to be aware of the difference between Wesley's sermons preached in the open air compared to the printed standard sermons. When you read a John Wesley sermon, there's no comparison between the words alive on the page in front of you and what the crowds thrilled to hear preached in the mean streets of 18th century industrial towns. Wesley knew large tranches of his sermons, gold standard words, off by heart. He also knew the Bible deeply, in Hebrew, Greek and Latin. He knew his aims and objectives in the sense that he knew what his preaching had to achieve, what the gospel had to do in the context. So the crowds inevitably gathered to listen. Sure, some heckled and jeered, others listened unmoved, but usually the majority heard him gladly and were moved. But that open-air preaching was transitory, over and done in a matter of minutes or hours. What we have is the printed editions of his sermons, which he worked over, revising and polishing and putting into various lists. And that's the vital clue about the sermons. What's in a title? The sermon titles are more than important. They exert the leverage. The title, combined with the verse that Wesley wants to apply, can do far more to promote the message of the gospel than all the words of the sermons together. Here are the first 5 titles in the standard 44 sermons. 1. Salvation by grace. By grace are ye saved through faith. Ephesians 2:8. 2. The almost Christian. Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. Acts 26:8. 3. Awake, thou that sleepest. Awake, thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. Ephesians 5:14. 4. Scriptural Christianity. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost. Acts 4:31. And finally, 5. Justification by faith. To him that worketh not, but believeth on him that justifieth the ungodly, his faith is counted to him for righteousness. And that's from Romans 4:5. Now, in today's age of the internet, emails, messages, chats, video conferences, Mr. Wesley, social entrepreneur extraordinary, has hit the sweet spot. Almost all the titles, oddly enough, conform to Twitter rules, about 140 characters maximum. The first 5 sermons have titles which fit the YouTube guide of searching for 50 characters. In the print media, the titles as chapter headings lay out the plan of what this book is all about. The title is the leverage, and back in his day and age, Wesley knew that too. Note that not all the sermon titles are lifted from the Bible verse, so we find sequences of interconnected sermons, and the titles demonstrate how they're linked. For example, the nature of enthusiasm, a caution against bigotry, Catholic spirit, Christian perfection. That's a manifesto all of a piece. Now, to conclude this episode, we'll just have a look at the 44 sermon titles. Just joking, you'll find that information in the About section of this YouTube video. What I want to highlight is that of the 44 standard sermons, 13 have exactly the same title. It's the Sermon on the Mount. And that's a crucial fact about how Wesley applies practical theology into better daily living. 30% of his most widely used book for preachers and helpers, and indeed the whole Methodist movement, concentrates on Jesus' practical application of the gospel into everyday life. And the title he gives is like code that every Christian knows. The Sermon on the Mount. And this is where Jesus puts out in plain view how to live better each day with his values in action. So see you next week when we show you how Stuart Mannins and myself have created a resource called Gospel that makes use of John Wesley's insights into the Sermon on the Mount for the contemporary church. And thanks for watching.